Presence, so ubiquitous, so essential to the spiritual path. Feels a lot like whenever I browse on my YouTube feed, I see something new about presence, about staying present, about the benefit of presence. It can feel a little bit over and over and over again, beaten over the head for some of us. But this question came, and it is actually so essential. So I'm going to take a different spin on it. The question was, what is the importance of presence? How do we stay present? How do we make sure that we are getting the most out of presence? So, this teaching is going to be about a specific aspect of presence. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, this is described, at least translated, as luminous, luminosity, a natural luminosity to things. And that can be a little bit confusing for newcomers. It can even be confusing for those that have been practicing for a long time. But what is this luminosity of the presence? What is this energetic, possibly, element that can both ground us in the presence of things, but then also enrich our experience of life? This enriching aspect is really what I want to get at today. So, to begin, a lot of the things that can happen to new meditators, as well as those who possibly have just been learning on their own, is that we can become a little bit fixated to a meditational experience. And especially at the beginning, the meditational experience is something similar to relaxation. Possibly we've been caught up in our daily lives and we've been working jobs or taking care of others or volunteering. And our daily task lists are forever consuming our thoughts. We have thought chains even when we're resting. Possibly we have a lot of distracting coping strategies as well. And so we're constantly consumed by thought, by feelings, and by activities, tasks, and let's describe it as a micro or mini type of future imagination that's always happening. Always putting ourselves into a future context. What do I have to do next? What comes after this? What in what way can I fix this problem or adjust things or just complete something that needs to get done? And how do I do that in a stream of one after another, like a list? So this is part of our daily 21st century lives. We are constantly in this modality of working, efforting towards essential parts of being human. Getting ourselves fed, making ourselves comfortable, getting the stuff that we need to survive, so to speak. And so we're consumed by that. And because of that, we are generally distracted by all of that. And we don't really have a chance to check in. So for some of us, we start the meditational journey by taking a break from that world and giving ourselves some time to rest. What can happen when we do that is that we become very sleepy when we meditate. We rest, and it's like the first time we've gotten rest in possibly years at the beginning. So when we do that, it feels very calm. Possibly it feels like there's a million thoughts at the beginning, but they all start to finally fall away. And then it's like sleepy. We fall, oh man, gotta fall asleep. Maybe I gotta get up off this cushion and go to bed. That's very common. And what's interesting about this is that when we bring it into this context of presence, this is actually something that is starting to get into this calm feeling of what presence can be. We are starting to experience this presence that we aren't experiencing otherwise during our lives. And so now that we're meditating, we're taking a break and just resting in the present context, we are suddenly touching this aspect of calm. And so this aspect of calm is something that is actually essential to presence. And there's many people that meditators, as well as people that are meditation aficionados, if you will, if that's actually all they want out of it, that's what it's for to them. However, that's not really unlocking the true potential of what presence can be. It's actually only really scratching the surface of presence. Because that feeling of calm is actually something that can be accessed all the time. And it doesn't also have to make us so sleepy feeling. The reason why we oftentimes feel sleepy is when we meditate is because we have so many thought chains, we have so many task lists, we have so much distraction in our lives that when we finally get a break from it, it feels very relieving. And this relief that we feel, this comfort that we finally feel, is like finishing the end of a long race, as if you're running a marathon and you're finally done. You collapse. However, that's not the point. The point is actually if you start to recognize that this presence is always there in your life throughout your day, then that feeling of calm can be there then. And additionally, because you're not having this huge juxtaposition between exhaustive, taskless, distraction activities and then presence, there isn't this huge distinction. And so it doesn't make you tired anymore because we're really getting tired because we're exhausted from the other stuff and we just haven't given ourselves a break. So, some of the methods to bringing this in to these other moments is really fostering more awareness. And I know that this is something that a lot of other Buddhist traditions talk about, Zen traditions, but it's also common in all Buddhist traditions. And really, this is becoming more aware of the inner world, the world of thoughts, the world of feelings, and the world actually of sensations. As we start to look inward throughout our day, we can do little check ins. And as we do little check ins throughout our day, we will start to see, oh, this presence that I might have felt during my meditation at the end of my day or at the beginning of my day in the past, I'm now able to see that this presence is still here now. Still here now. Even in the midst of my work, I can maybe just take a step back, rest. Even for that 2 seconds, 3 seconds, we can find that this present calm, this dropping out of everything, this I'm going to just right now take a pause, a break from my thoughts, all of my tasks, my activities, and just rest. As we start to do that more, we will start to activate our essential wisdom. We'll find very directly that the present aspect is actually all that there is. There's never a point where there isn't this present moment. It's actually always there. And even when we are distracted in our thoughts, our feelings, our activities, the context of us engaging in those thought chains, engaging in those daydreams, engaging with the task list or the future imagining, it's always the present. We are never able to break free of this present. This present is all that there is. Now, what we can do with this is actually begin to engage with a deep study of what the present is. And as we gain more confidence by these check ins that we can do throughout our days, we can start to study more what the difference is between these check ins and normal activity life. Is there a difference or is there not a difference? So, as we start to study this internally, we start to see that really the only difference is a difference that we ourselves are making. There's no essential difference, but we say that there is a difference. Our minds say that there's a difference. We feel more tired, more exhausted, more distracted. When we're in the midst of our tasks, we feel like we're doing something. We feel possibly like there's a lot of effort. When we are in our mundane lives, working and future imagining and striving and all of that. And then when we take a break, we feel like all of that's gone. Now, that's just a mental fabrication. If the present is accessible in our daily lives so much that we can access it whenever, then why isn't it accessible there? And we start to see, well, it's not accessible there because we're clinging, because our minds are fixated. And because our minds are fixated, it feels like there's the present isn't there suddenly. It feels like there is no calm presence. It feels instead like there's only the, for lack of a better word, BS that we're focusing on, right? Only that. Only this focus, this fixation. That's what's consuming our minds. Our concern about we have to do this thing, or our even procedural aspect of I must do this and then I have to do this and then I have to do this and right now I'm doing this, and that context of this thought chain, all of that is being fixated upon, and so it's only what we're seeing in our minds. So we're not keeping this context of actually there's this calm presence. So as we begin to really see that that's just based in our fixating mind. If we fixate, we don't feel like there's the presence. But then if we take a break, we feel like there's the presence again. Then what we can do with that is eventually get to a state where we can remember as we engage in our mundane worlds, our tasks, our to-dos, all of those, and our daydreams, right? Our feelings. We remember. We remember presence. We remember that this is all in the context of this presence. Now, there are a lot of different ways of describing this. In the Buddhist context, it goes into there's two different ways of describing this. I'm sure there's a lot of others as well in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions. But the two main ways are in the Dzogchen tradition, which is the old translation Nyingma, the old translation Nyingma school. The Dzogchen tradition calls this Trekchut, which involves cutting through. So wherever we are, we're cutting through to the essential nature of things. And this really involves understanding on a very deep level presence. This presence that is actually no other than the nature of our own minds. That is the Dzogchen. I won't go into too much about that. There's a million other teachers that can tell you all about that. And then there's the new translation schools, such as the Kagyu schools, and the Kagyu school in Mahamudra. They describe this as, or one way that is described is that this is all essentially the Dharmadhatu wisdom. This is all actually the essential Dharmadhatu. And so when we actually recognize that appearances and emptiness, or appearances, emptiness, and the Dharmadhatu are unified, then we can then recognize that all of these different mundane experiences are actually the nature of reality in the Dharmadhatu. So I'm mentioning these for further study if you're interested. I'm keeping this very high level by talking about it in terms of presence. But this presence, what's important to mention is that this present moment is never actually present. There is no such thing as present. We've created a term for a transient passing context. So present is like objectifying a transient transience. Everything around us is always moving and changing instantly, including our thoughts, including our feelings, and including our sensations and the appearances that are coming into our senses. So constantly there is this presence, but that is transient, always moving, always changing. And so when we start to take this break and bring ourselves back to the present in this meditative context, we will start to recognize that everything is moving and that everything is changing, but that this context of changing, of moving, is happening to, like, in this observing mind. This observing mind is observing it. And this observing mind is qualityless. It doesn't have any quality. So in the Dzogchen tradition, there is direct pointing out instructions to recognize the nature of the mind. And I'm not going to go into that here, but I can assure you that the mind has no quality. There is no quality to the observer. There is nothing that can be said about it. However, everything is observed. And this is actually now beginning into, we're now beginning to get into this luminous aspect that I wanted to invite you into here. So, right here, right now, wherever you are, if you bring your attention back to the present, what you'll recognize is that if you look around, everything that is around you is accessible, instantly accessible in your mind. Now, even if we have some, for example, I wear glasses, so I can take my glasses off. I might not see things the same way, right? We might not have the same sense faculties that are perfect. But whatever the appearances are, even if I close my eyes and I make a daydream, for example, I daydream about a giant pink elephant. We all imagine this giant pink elephant together. It's directly accessible in our minds. It's like instantly there. And we can now change our attention to something else. But this is always accessible to us. The present is accessible and changing. It's always there. Always. Even when we feel like it's not and we get distracted and whatever, when we recognize that everything is actually immediately coming in, even if we have narrowed our concentration, still, whatever we're concentrating on, like this pink elephant, for example, there is still the context of its presence. We're never leaving this present. And whatever is in the mind is directly accessible, not by us having to do anything. It's immediately present, immediately accessible. So now when we start to recognize this, start to meditate upon this, and we say, oh yes, everything that I experience in this present context is accessible. Everything that I've ever experienced in this present context, daydreams, feelings, thoughts, thought chains, imaginings, all has been immediately accessible in our minds, instantly, without really any effort. It's all there, immediately, without effort. I just haven't recognized this as something of importance. Because I haven't recognized this as something of importance, I get swept away by this transient, sensory, this transient sensory experience, right? And that's actually a perfect example, right? So you see the little thumbs up thing. You get swept away by this transient sensory experience. This transient sensory experience that's also connected with all of our feelings. And what happens is that because we don't recognize that it's transient, we don't recognize that it's present, then we don't relax. And when we don't relax, we subtly fixate. We subtly fixate to all sorts of these images, these senses, as well as these feelings and these thought chains and these daydreams, etc. So we constantly engage with them. But when we take a step back, we recognize that it's really all just happening immediately in our minds, accessible in our minds. When we know this, now this is the luminous part. When we know this context directly, that this is just mentally accessible. It's not accessible anywhere else. but mentally, directly, in your mind, in my mind. My mind, though, has a different context of this accessibility than yours, right? I have different senses and all of those types of things. I have different objects in my senses. For example, there's a window here with a beautiful view of the sky in front of me. You can't see that. But this, even still, context, I know, and you know, that each other, right? I know in your context that you have all sorts of sensory things in your mind and all sorts of potentially thoughts and feelings going on, swirling in your mind. Similarly, you know that about me. I have that too. We have the same context of this present moment and that's changing. We both know that. It's essential, actually, to our consciousness, our existence. But what we don't oftentimes remember is that this context is the only context. That's actually the only thing that we can really say. That I know the mind within it has these inputs and that's changing. That this is changing. Presently changing. Transient. And so if we both recognize this, then actually this aspect is what is described as luminous. The luminosity is actually coming from our awareness, our understanding directly. Oh, this is just the present. Oh, this is just in my mind. Transient. The present mind matter. When this is really, really understood directly, and we remember it mindfully as we go about our days, that evokes a luminous aspect. It actually radiates a luminous aspect from our awareness that is then mirrored in our experience. Now that can feel a little bit like, what is he talking about? Luminous aspect, awareness, right? But I'll put it this way. If we remember that this is the present moment, and we recognize that no matter what we're going through, possibly really strong emotions, possibly, maybe we're upset, or we're lost in a task and we feel like it's not getting better, or whatever. We're just going about our days willy-nilly. When we recognize that this is just presently transient, it's all changing, and it's all happening within our minds. Pink elephant, right? There it is. Pink elephant again appeared in our minds. We remember that this is just that. All of this is just appearing in our minds transiently, never fixating, or never stable, because it's always changing. Even if we hold on to a fixation for quite some time, eventually it will pass. And everything else is changing, even if we hold on to a fixation. The world, leaves are blowing out there. My voice is talking. This time is marching on. When we really become stable in this presence and we remember this context, recognizing this context directly, then we will have access to a wider understanding of everything. And that means that in the context of our lives, we will be able to be more creative. We will be able to access a lot more of existence. We will have a lot more understanding about what's around us because we will notice it more, because we will be less prone to fixating. We will be less prone to living in the illusion that this is in the past, present, and future illusion. We won't really get ahead of ourselves. So instead of getting ahead of ourselves, we'll be settled in the present. And if we're settled in the present, we can find things easier. We will have a richer understanding, a richer experience of the present. And this richer experience of the present invites us. It actually is from both sides. First is by our awareness that we actually are wider, our minds are much more open because we recognize that this present context is always there. So our minds are much more open to experiencing a wider context. And then additionally, because our minds are being that way, the world around us is also, or our appearances, our thoughts, for example, our feelings, as well as the sensory inputs, are much more receptive to us because we aren't forcing anything. We are now very open, remembering, even if we're caught in the focus of something, oh, I have to do this thing, I'm focused, I still remember that everything else is around. So then if potentially the world changes as it's known to do, and someone interrupts me, or something interrupts me, or I notice something out of the corner of my eye, it doesn't feel as grating to turn the attention because the attention isn't turning anywhere but the present. So no matter where I look, no matter what I feel, no matter what I think, the context is still this transient presence that's only happening in the mind. Now, is there anything that's really going to distress me when I look around? Oh, someone hits me over the head. Hey, I forget you, in the middle of this teaching. Hey, I need you. There's something going on. That's just another present moment. It's not anything else but a transient presence. And yet, when we are open to it, then that experience, rather than us subtly shutting it off, like, oh, I don't want to see that, what do you want me to do? We invite it. We feel open to it. We feel enriched by it. So, for example, I have these singing bowls that are behind you, and I have these. They are for playing the singing bowls, and they're just sitting here, right? They're just sitting here, right off to the side here. When I look around the room, there's all sorts of things like that. If I was to go outside and look around, there's all sorts of things like that. There's all little pieces of earth. There's seeds that have fallen from the trees outside. There are skittering creatures. There are intricate sounds. All of that is there all the time. These are here all the time. I don't know when they were put here, but, right? Here they are. If I bring my attention to this majestic presence, then suddenly it becomes very luminous. It becomes very bright because it's actually enriching to the mind, and when it's in this open, receptive state of presence. It's all tremendous. It's all incredible because all of the intricacy of existence is accessible instantly to the mind. Instantly, the mind can create a majestic daydream. We can meditate, and we can create a million castles in the sky in our minds with all these intricate little details. And then we can just let it all dissolve away. We can do all of that in the mind. We can also recognize all of this rich aspect of existence around us all the time. It's just that we oftentimes don't allow ourselves to do that. We don't allow ourselves to be open to this wider context beyond just our immediate problem or our immediate concern. So, this luminosity is really brought by this wisdom. It's evoked by this wisdom. This wisdom that this is just present. This is just happening within the mind. And yet it appears. There's appearance of the pink elephant or, the cushion or the, the whatever this is, the drumstick or the crystal singing bowl instrument, right? All of this is here. All of it is present. And it's all changing and transforming. And so every moment actually invites us continuously into an experience of an ineffable, beautiful, majestic now. There's never a point where there isn't this beautiful, majestic now. It's just that we have gotten fixated and we don't recognize this beautiful, majestic aspect because we're narrow in our view rather than seeing that this is just present, just in our minds, and that it's always changing. So there's always something. It's always brand new, right? It's always brand new. And so all of this is accessible. We can see this brand new context to the world around us, no matter where we are. And even if we're in a room like this, where maybe not a lot of things change, but I will assure you that still, just because of causes and conditions and activities of people like myself, this room changes every week. Move something here, move something there. I always have to clean up before I do these teachings because there's something new, something changed, something different. These weren't here last week. Now here they are here now. And so when we don't live in this present context, we miss all of this because it's just so common. Oh, yeah, move that there. Because we're busy trying to do something else, we miss actually that this is immediately accessible and luminous and mysterious in some ways. I mean, it is just causes and conditions, but it's brand new, instantly available, instantly majestic, instantly alive and rich with its liveliness, with its changing, with the sounds. Everything is alive in that way. And so when we start to experience this more and more through this checking in and then eventually letting go of our fixations and or basically a limited context, letting go of our limited context, even if we're focused on something, and to really feel this presence, where we can get to eventually is a state of pure union with the 5 elements as it's described in Buddhism. These 5 elements are actually always transient. They're not really the elements. These 5 elements are actually in Tibetan Buddhism describes as the 5 dakinis. And these dakinis are nothing more than what dakinis translate to in English is sky dancer. The world around us is actually present, luminous in our minds. And in its present luminous aspect in our minds, there is a illusory aspect to it because there isn't a stable present. It's always transient, it's always moving, and it's only available in our minds. When we really recognize that, then we actually see that there is nothing other than the union of this observing aspect, this observer, even though that kind of makes it sound like an entity, but it's this observing aspect and this bright, luminous presence. And this bright, luminous presence that's always changing is actually, its nature is this luminous dakini aspect. And then we are in union with that, always. Always in union with it. It's never separate. So it's, as I said, directly accessible. And so this experience of union, really in this way of recognizing, and again, I'm putting this into a mental framework, not a tantric framework. In the mental framework, this experience is just this presence. Again, except this presence is blissful. The experience of this presence is all that there is, majestic, perfect, observing, observed, unified. And this final recognition brings everything into a blissful, single-pointed union. This blissful, single-pointed union of observed and observer is now this open, and it is now possible in this open-minded presence. And it's now accessible to you in this open-minded presence. There's no one, no single person, no single consciousness that this is not accessible to right now. It's just that we have gotten distracted and confused by wanting different observed things to appear. And so because we want different observed things to appear, we get lost from time to time. But if we just recognize that everything is immediately accessible in this presence as it is, and that it is absolutely majestic, and that it's all just appearing directly to this observing aspect, there is nothing else but that. And this is truly the most can be the most profound recognition that there is. Once this recognition is stabilized, there's nothing else to be done. There's nothing else to be done. This is a place of bliss. There is no self, no other, no duality, just observed, observer in union, just this incredible, majestic, present transience in harmony, really, with this observer that normally is not in harmony with it, right? We're not generally in harmony with the majestic present around us. So this is a teaching that started a bit high level and then went very deep. But no matter where you are at in your meditation practice, there's something in here that I hope helps you from the bottom of my heart. What I really wish for you, and as well as for myself, for everybody, is that we are invited into a deep study of the presence, the presence context, of this transient presence. By engaging in a deep study of this over the course of our lives and learning how to form a relationship with it that is one of love, one of responsiveness, rather than reaction, rather than forcefulness. We can together reach a point of deep realization on the nature of things where we no longer are held back by the artificial constructs of human life, of human needs, and instead are able to really take our place in the present here and now that is luminous, transient, and illusory to benefit everyone else around us. That is my deep wish for you, and it's my deep wish for myself, for all beings. And thank you so much for listening to these words. Until next time, please be well.